Hi, and welcome to Gin with Gwynne. I'm Gwynne, and this is where we talk about marketing philosophy and data. This week is part 3 of an unplanned trilogy of articles. So, in part 1, I talked about how we should emphasize behaviors over outcomes. In part 2, I talked about process mapping and how processes then ladder up to those behaviors. And in part 3, I am talking about data and how data then informs processes. So let's just imagine we've got our processes mapped out on a flow. We know the decisions that need to be made. The next thing that we want to do is understand all of the different data sources that go into those particular decision points. So what is a data source? It's anything that basically generates information. It could be a website, a tool, a file, anything that basically draws data that helps us make a decision. And typically, one of the key problems that we have today is that it takes a few different data sources, we have to overlap them, and then that gives us a much clearer picture on the decision that we need to make. But the data tends to sit in silos unless you centralize it, model it, and get to an answer. So it could be, for example, that you've got in one place lifetime value of customers, in another place you've got product tracking, you overlap those things, and then you understand which features on your app the high value users are using, and you know where to spend your development time and optimize towards that. It could be, for example, that you've got LTV and you've got advertising data, and you overlap those things so that your advertiser can give you more people who are more closely aligned to your high LTV users. So overlapping data gives you a more complete picture. But it's also a real key strategic decision. Because, and this will sound counterintuitive, what you want to look for is the least possible data that you need to inform that decision. You want to find the simplest answer or simplest data point that you possibly can to inform a decision. Why? What a lot of large companies are really guilty of doing is they start thinking about what they need to inform a decision, and they start thinking about what would be nice to know. And they incorporate loads of data because they can, because they've got the budget for that. Very dangerous when you've got the budget and you've got the team in place to start thinking, let's create this whole picture. And that's not what happens. Actually, they get this sort of analysis paralysis. They've got too much information and they're not really sure what is important to that decision in the first place. And it costs them a lot of money to get there. So from a strategic point of view, when you're mapping out your processes, find all the data points or data sources that inform that particular one, but also try and evaluate which is the one that's going to make the biggest difference to your process, to your particular decision that you're trying to make. Look for leading indicators. What do I mean by that? So we talked in the last part about variables that you can control in your processes. And you also want to look for variables in this particular case. So my example throughout the series has been you're cold contacting somebody on LinkedIn. Well, there's loads of variables that go into who you contact. You know, you could divide that in any way that you wanted. It could be gender bias. It could be small versus large companies. It could be their position that they've got. And when you go through the data that you've already collected, your first party data, all you have to do basically is go through and apply and see if that thing made a particular difference in who converted. So you've got all your opportunities there. You've got 500, and maybe you'll find that, 100% of the people we convert were product managers, or nobody that we converted was a marketing manager, but we're spending time optimizing to ours. So you identify, number one, the sources that make the biggest difference. Number two, your leading indicator and what's going to get you to a decision as quickly as possible. The next thing to do when you've mapped that out is, yes, you're going to have to go through some process of centralisation. So extracting that data, modeling it, which is that process of overlapping it, of putting your bespoke business logic onto it, and then it will be used in your decision-making flow. It could be that you use it to automate some of that, or it could be that it's fed into a dashboard so that a human makes a decision. But you're going to have to go through that process of modeling that data. And of course, data is numbers. It is ones and zeros. And so it's really, really important when you're looking at your process. We talked about getting rid of outliers, getting rid of edge cases, getting rid of unusual circumstances that don't often happen, because data is always going to be black and white. It's always going to be ones and zeros. And it's really important when you're applying data to your processes that there's a definite black and white answer to every single decision. Could be, let's come back to my example from last time. I said, oh, if this person has read, if this person has not read, they're not interested, get rid of them. That doesn't work because, as I said last time, a lot of people don't have read receipts on their LinkedIn. So your decision needs to be really black and white and say, okay, if someone hasn't replied to 4 and you can check that, then they go to this place. You've got the data to put that into your process. All of your data really needs to be set up with a thinking that you don't want outliers. You don't want any sort of objectivity in there. So again, thinking of sales, hot and cold leads, that's a very objective thing. What's hot to one person might be not hot to another. Somebody might just naturally say to you, oh my God, this is amazing, thanks for sending it me. Doesn't necessarily mean they're a good prospect. So you want to remove objectivity as much as possible when you're thinking about which data informs your processes. And then the next part is you go through your entire process and you map out all of those things and you centralize all your data. And again, normally for a lot of companies, there's one key sort of data source that will get you a long way to an answer. So you're not having to worry about so many data sources being integrated. Often this is a back-end database, or it's the database or the data source that's most closely aligned to your business. So if you're a subscription business, you've probably got some sort of tool to manage your subscriptions, and that's going to be the key data source that will give you answers throughout the entire customer journey. If you are an e-commerce business, it might be something like Shopify. So if you can start off by 1, creating a data stack, and 2, finding these key data sources, that will get you to an answer on a lot of your processes, which will then inform your behavior. And so there we have it. We've come to a conclusion, and let's just work our way backwards. So the good thing about data is it doesn't lie. Ones and zeros just can't lie, especially if you've made sure that they're very objective. You've got data points throughout your process. They're going to inform you which part of that process is working and which is not working, which means that you can then optimize your process. There's different variables that you have control over. There's normally not that many variables, to be honest. But with the data informing those variables, you can A/B test things. You can get them down to a real niche where you know 9 times out of 10, this is the message that works. This is the process that works. This is the timing that will work. And with that process improved, you don't have to worry so much about KPIs. Your process is improving that all the time, as long as your team are following the underlying behaviors that you're trying to encourage. So the whole point of this series of blogs has been my thoughts on not optimizing towards outcomes that you can't control. Instead, put in place automated data that will ladder up to your processes and ultimately encouraging the right behaviors in your team that are sustainable, that are scalable, that are teachable, because that is really what will drive growth in your business over the long term. Thanks for following this series. I'll be back next week with something else. Tune in there.